for the Prader-Willi National Organization. So I'm often in schools when things have gotten really bad. Past when they should have called and said, we need help and training, which really pisses me off. It's like, had you called 6 months ago? Because sometimes by the time I get there, they just don't like the kid anymore. Yeah. And I've had to say sometimes to a parent, just get him the hell out of here because this is not salvageable. And that is really sad when it's your home school district, and but you feel it. So middle and high school for any kid is terrible, but it's really rough on these guys. The anxiety is increased, and as we know, they don't manage their anxiety very well. There's all kinds of sources for anxiety. One of the biggies, aside from access to food, that's the first thing you have to do is get the school to understand that, is unrealistic cognitive and behavioral expectations, because these guys present really well sometimes. Great social conversation and appear as though they right on target. Some of the most difficult folks I work with are the ones who are the most cognitively sophisticated, shall we say. They're the toughest. So when people say to me, oh, I won't have the same problems, my kid has a high IQ, I just sort of go, so they have this change in middle school, and then they're going to do it again for high school, right? It's two different worlds, at least it is in the States. So the buildings are bigger, there's new teachers, and they're moving around. Even if they're in a special ed class, it's new teachers, they're still going out for art or music or PE, and there's a new nurse, and God knows they love their nurses, and new counselors and new clinicians and new administrators, new bus driver, perhaps, and we forget about that bus trip. That's a dangerous time. New students, and again, the expectations are tough. And it's noisier and it's hectic, and teenagers bump into each other in the hallway a lot, and they start talking a talk that you don't know. You should have a handout that says teenage language, and I just gave you that for fun. I have I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. I don't have a clue what they're talking about most of the time. So I asked my college students to, and that's where that, make a list of the current jargon so I can relate to my children. But that is part of the problem with folks with disabilities, intellectual disabilities, is they can't keep up. And we were just talking about kids who still are interested in the Wiggles, at 12, 13 years old, when they're supposed to be interested in, I don't know, what are you interested in? Something more age appropriate. At this point, maybe it was determined he needs to spend more time in a separate setting in the school, but in a special ed classroom, or even a special school. As your child progresses, maybe you're seeing, and some of you may have already gone through this, less and less, more and more struggle with less and less benefit. And the frustration is being expressed through behavior in school. Or sometimes, I've had some kids who seem to be fine at school, they come home and fall apart. It's like, God bless them, holding it together all day long, and they come home and their parents want to kill them. Why don't you do that there? Don't save it for me. So it's a perfect storm of learning disabilities, behavior disabilities, environmental stressors, and that is tough for them, equally as tough for you. And as we know, they don't have good expressive language. I was just saying in the other room that they can understand better than they can express, not long strings of information, but I heard a story once, maybe you told me this story, about a mom who was commiserating with his son because he was struggling with something, he was upset, he was frustrated, and she said, oh, honey, I wish I could just get inside your head so I would understand. And the kid goes, oh no, you don't want to go there. It's a mess up there. And I thought, how insightful. and how revealing for us. If it's getting that bad, you may need somebody who really, you may need me, for example, someone who really has an expertise in Prader-Willi syndrome to come in and observe what's going on. The behaviors he was exhibiting in elementary school are getting worse, and he's bigger, damn girl hormone, and he's stronger, and he can run faster, hit harder, all those things if he happens to have aggression. But what's going on is he's increasingly overwhelmed with the increasingly stringent academic and social demands that he is supposed to manage. Sometimes we just need to slow things down. Often we just take them out of mainstream math class, and that makes a big difference. Math class is fraught with peril for these guys. It's always math class. He may need a targeted support plan. This is just a list of some of the things that may be going on for him. If he or she is starting to complain about school and refusing to go, do any of your kids start to refuse to go to school or don't get off the bus when they get there? Oh, you're so lucky. Huh? Sometimes. When they start refusing, not wanting to go, or they act out enough at school that they get sent home, we got to pay attention. Often they're upset about the para because she's just too intrusive. You have a sheet that says when things go awry at school, and that's a list of things to look at before you call in the Army, because sometimes it's really pretty simple. It's often para-related, tone of voice, is she nice? And what they consider nice and mean, you know, could be a thin line. If he's starting to do all kinds of things to escape class, oh, I don't feel, gotta go to the nurse, they love the nurse. Picking until it bleeds, so he goes to the nurse to get the Band-Aids. He's starting to sleep more in class. He's refusing to do in-class assignments or get on and off the bus. He's swearing at the teacher, destroying property. We gotta jump in there. We gotta jump in there fast. Bottom line is the kid spending so much time out of class that he's not benefiting academically. I've been telling the story, I'm working with a family now, and their son, it's a fully mainstream school, and they don't have any pull-out special classes. So he's in mainstream for everything. He has a one-on-one parent, she's lovely. However, he's in this math class, doesn't have a clue what's going on. His goal in that class is not to learn math, it's just to stay in the room. And that's a long time to stay in a room, 15 minutes or so. And I just said to that, well, so your goal is compliance, that he needs to sit in a place that he doesn't get any benefit from for 50 minutes. Compliance is a big issue in school. That's the first thing, to be compliant. So we did work it out that he would get his math instruction from the para, who would get the work from the teacher. It was just, I'm like, duh. The goal is for him to sit there and be miserable? What a goal. If your child is also at this age starting to use inappropriate sexual language or touching, I have that come up frequently, accusing others of saying or doing something inappropriate, threatening to kill himself or others, telling grandiose stories about his life, reporting mistreatment or abuse at home, that's to create havoc. Have any of you been accused of abuse? Your kid goes to school and tells the teacher, my mom or dad did this to me? Yeah. Well, and you probably have to get investigated, at least in the States. Boy, when a teacher hears that, they're mandated reporters, and they're on the phone, and the poor mom gets the knock on the door, and we're investigating you because your son said he did. I did a survey about this once. 99.9% of these allegations of abuse are unfounded, by the way. Big problem in group homes, where they want, I'll get you fired. And they can do it. That's one of the reasons for a lot of staff turnover. The threatening to kill themselves, or, I mean, you can't not pay attention to those things, but you have to know the kid. One of the issues, and this is why it's under special concerns, is these are the things that schools get really upset about, could fall into legal issues. There could be a spillover there. If your 16-year-old son, and now he has growth hormone and he's this tall and looks normal and he's touching a girl, that's legal. That's going to go big time. If not with the cops, the other mother isn't going to be too happy with you. So it's dangerous. Academically, he did well in elementary school. He felt successful. He was grade level. He was reading. But now we know, up until 4th grade, you're learning to read. After 4th grade, you're reading to learn. And that's a whole different ballgame. Math class is just torture. He was really good at adding and subtracting. Now it's word problems, which are very difficult, abstract symbols. So he's falling further and further behind. And the situation is really stressful for him, and he knows it, but he does. How do you? Some kids will say, this one kid in the math class, he said, I don't want to be here. This is too hard. They know it and I don't. And I'm like, why isn't anybody listening to him? Because he would go to the math class and he'd act out and storm out and make a big scene. Sometimes it's like amazing to me. Socially, she may have fewer and fewer friends. She doesn't know how to hold a conversation, or he doesn't, that isn't focused on her or her interest. She doesn't understand the slang people are using. His interests aren't age appropriate. She writes notes to people, but they don't write back. When he gets upset, he knows people are looking at him, and he doesn't want that. The girl he likes won't hang out with him. And here's something that happened once. I was in New Hampshire. This guy in high school was being hospitalized for psychiatric reasons. So I had to work it backwards. You always have to go backwards with these guys, right, to figure out what the hell happened here. Lo and behold, after lots of conversations with people around him, he was a rule guy, as many are. You know, this is how it's supposed to be. He was walking around school with the school handbook of rules. That made him really popular in high school. And so, of course, these are teenagers, and he was seeing violations right and left. People were touching each other and using language and being late, and he couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle it. He had a psychotic break. Things that you don't always think of. The sexuality, this is when, if they're in the gym class, they're noticing there's small penis, and the girls don't have their period, they want boyfriends and girlfriends. They're seeing sex and having sex, and or maybe they're questioning their sexual orientation, and he wants to touch another boy. And he's like, how come I get in trouble when I talk about sex? Because they're all doing it. The difference is they know how to do it sneakily, right? And our guys don't have that skill. It's a social skill to get away with stuff. They can get away with the food thing, but it's really hard for them to get away with the social aspect. And at the very end of high school, you're a wreck, first of all, because you don't know where your kid's going. Once they're out of school, what's your kid going to do? Do you know? You're not sure. They feel that from you. They feel it for themselves. What am I going to do all day when school is over? Will I live at home or move away like my sister? Am I going to this day program? I don't think I like that day program. I don't think it sounds good. And I perceive my parents as being anxious. And I have my job as the manager of the basketball team. What about that? I mean, that was maybe a status thing. And so you do some kind of transition planning, and you know, what are your hopes and dreams, Johnny? Well, I want a job working with animals and children, of course. That's universal. I want to drive a car. I want my own apartment. I want to handle my own money. I want to buy my own groceries. That's very specific. I want to get married. I want to have children. I don't want other people telling me what to do all the time. Okay. That's what they want. It's just too much to handle. Now, I already mentioned that in high school, the breaking of the rules, the pressure to look ahead. So you start transition planning. At what age do you, we have to do it legally at age 16 in the States. You have to develop a transition plan. Do you have anything like that? Well, they get out of school at 18. Yeah. In the States, they can stay in school till 21. And so they may or may not have completed the academic, a couple states it's 26. I know, those parents think they died and went to heaven. So the states can keep them longer, but the Fed said at least till 21. So some kids, especially if they can't meet the graduation requirements, stay on for, we just call it, post-grad. And the focus then becomes more vocational and life skills, that sort of thing. So I have a bunch of people at my university who are in a program. They're between 18 and 21. They come to the college and they audit a course, and it's just beautiful. They're so happy there. So at some point, you've got to say, well, we got to make a plan for this kid because I can't have him sitting at home. I can't. I got a job. I got other kids. What's he going to do? So hopefully you determine, does he need more life skills, social skills, does he need a voc assessment, work experience. Some of our kids can go to college. We have graduates of 4-year colleges. Some can be competitively employed with supports. We don't have a lot of research on employment and Prader-Willi syndrome. The little we have says very rarely can they do a 40-hour week. It's just too much when you think about what they have to deal with. And so part-time, and they get fired for reasons like not coming back from lunch on time, poor interaction with the supervisor when the supervisor corrects them. The kinds of things you know already are going to get in the way. So you really need a job that's the right job with the right supports. Pet grooming, we all know pets are where it's at. A lot of the girls don't want to go into child care, sheltered workshops, which are necessary for some folks who just really need a sheltered environment. And then do you have to think about residential options? For those of you who have children who are extremely challenging, shall we say, you're thinking about it. You need help. Bottom line, you just need help. So one of the things that we try and do at that age is, first of all, we could be surprised. Sometimes they do things where we're like, I can't believe you could do that. I'm often amazed, for example, when someone, I remember this guy in a program said, I just really want to work at the grocery store. And we're like, ha, 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 right? But he really wanted to do that. He wanted to be the cart guy. And fortunately, the agency said, okay, and we'll monitor your weight. And what was the other thing? Well, that tells everything. There's something else. So, and that would be the criteria of you keeping the job or losing the job, unless he gets fired for other reasons. He did it. And I'd like to let people know that if an individual they sometimes can be so highly motivated for something, doesn't mean they can do it all day long, but maybe they can do something. Doesn't mean it generalizes. Some people really want to go to church. That's really important to them. But there's friggin' food all over the place. When I was growing up, there was, you had the host and that was it. And you were starving because you had to not eat for 3 hours. I'm old. So, and you had fish on Friday. But now it's all friendship hour and blah. So there's all this food there, and you're saying, oh yeah, of course he wants to go to church. Of course he does. Maybe if you plan ahead of time and you can say you get your cup of coffee and you can pick one thing, maybe he can do that because church is meaningful. And I think we have to work harder at finding out what they can do instead of making assumptions. So person-centered planning is an actual process. The person's in the middle. You have meeting with like people who love him, his parents, some other Aunt Mary, and you work on what the person wants. And it could be, let's say, I have a daughter who has some learning challenges, and she loves animals. She wants to be a vet. I know she could not handle that curriculum, but I don't want to say that, right? So what you do is you say, okay, well, first of all, you're failing biology. You say, well, we know that science is difficult for you, so why don't we start at the community college and take one science course and see how you do? And you go to the college where they have a vet tech program, perhaps, and you keep working, see how far they can go. You never know. Right now we're just trying to get her to get a job at Petco or someplace, so she doesn't need gas money from us all the time. But it's that kind of take their dream, break it down into manageable steps so that they go as far as they can go, and then they can say, okay, I did all I could do. I'm happy or I'm not. I had to do this picture, Linda. Linda sent me this picture. I just love this picture. I love New Zealand, for one, but it's just such a positive image. And so you're starting on a new chapter, and depending on your country and what rules you have, I'm sorry that your kids are kicked out around 17. That seems really young to exit from school when you have an intellectual disability. I mean, they're like 13, right? A lot of them.
21 in New Zealand.
That's 21 in New Zealand? That's good. You've got to work it. See, this is where being part of the UK chapter, this is the kind of advocacy, educational advocacy you would want to have. And so you got to get on in the state. You got to get in a waiting list. It's like a 15-year waiting list for residential services. So, yeah, it's terrible. In the States, we have all kinds of educational rights, and the parents are like, this is great, I get these services, I'm entitled to this, my kids, it's like, you still have to fight and make sure they understand your kid, but you got something. You step out that door from high school, you got nothing. There are things that are out there that you could utilize if you're not on the if you're on the waiting list, but it's not an automatic, there's nothing guaranteed, which is probably true here too, right? Nobody's standing there waiting for you to say, oh, Mom, let me help you. Nobody. Anyway, that's when you talk to their families and really get your kid involved in trying to look ahead. Thank you. Here's some resources that may or may not be helpful. I don't know if there's any time for questions. Yeah. After my fiasco this morning with not getting through it. Any questions?
Any questions after that?
Oh my God.
No? Okay. You've answered everybody's question.
I don't know.